Last week, we posed an interesting homework assignment: how to take the downward pick slanting system of Yngwie Malmsteen and Eric Johnson and use it to play the venerable ascending fours pattern against the pentatonic scale. It seems like a harmless enough assignment, right? The pentatonic scale is very common, fours is very common, and yet almost no one ever plays it. And that's because sometimes patterns and sequences that might be simple on other instruments are made challenging on guitar because of picking technique. Well, it turns out that with a basic understanding of downward pick slanting mechanics, there are a couple of really nice solutions to this problem that let you play a pattern that even virtuosos have tended to avoid. And it also turns out that Cracking the Code viewers were really good at finding them. We got the first 5 correct solutions in about an hour, and that very quickly grew to over 100, most of which were amazingly correct. Of those correct solutions, the majority hit upon the more technically sophisticated of the 2 main approaches to this problem, which looks like this. What we're seeing here is a fairly space-age combination of alternate picking and sweeping that broadly mirrors Yngwie's approach to the volcano pattern from Season 2, Episode 2. And what's interesting is that we would have expected this solution to be somewhat less obvious than the counterpart solution that relies on pure alternate picking and looks like this. This solution is conceptually simpler because the alternating sequence of downstrokes and upstrokes is totally uninterrupted. And we know that to make that work, we always have to switch strings after an upstroke. And Eric Johnson has already solved this problem for us. By grouping everything into units of 2 notes and starting on a downstroke, we can guarantee that the last note on every string is an upstroke. Now, for our purposes, we can take those units of 2 and group them into sequences of 4. And because that sequence of 4 is totally efficient, we can now move that unit of 4 anywhere else on the guitar we want. So in this case, we can do it in one position, then move up to the second position and do it again, and then move to a whole new set of strings and start over. You'll notice that I'm using 3-note per string fingerings here, and that's because the one weakness of this solution is the constant jumping around between positions. We can minimize this by keeping the index finger locked in this fret here and using the other fingers to do the heavy lifting. Now, the volcano-style solution to this pattern also uses these 3-note per string fingerings, but economizes on the picking by way of sweeping. Interesting, right? The pattern actually starts on an upstroke, and then uses a downward sweep for the string change, and then finishes on an upstroke. So unusual and counterintuitive, and yet such a classic Yngwie thing to do. Yngwie starts his famous arpeggio sequence on an upstroke. And this is fascinating because Yngwie is not a guy that overly intellectualizes his guitar technique, and yet his picking decisions are always supremely considered. So that's the first unit of 4. The second unit of 4 starts over again on the low string. And to get there, we're going to use alternate picking. And we can do this because downward pick slanting allows us to escape the strings and get right back into position. Now, once we're there, we only have 1 note on that low string. So we're going to use a downward sweep to play that note and sweep immediately back to the A string. And this is a textbook volcano maneuver. Remember, the volcano lick also had an upstroke on the A string and then a downward sweep on the E and the A. So in other words, alternate picking in the descending direction, sweeping in the ascending direction. This is the volcano way. It is a cornerstone of Yngwie's scalar playing, and it is incredibly powerful. Most guitar players avoid 1-note per string sequences like this because of all the jumping around, but Yngwie embraces them. His combination of downward pick slanting, alternate picking, and sweeping allows him to handle fretting combinations like this that would be really challenging with alternate picking alone. So that downward sweep is actually the first 2 notes of the second unit of 4. To get the 3rd and 4th notes, we're going to stay on the A string and use our 3-note per string fingerings and simply go upstroke, downstroke. And this puts us in the perfect spot for starting the whole sequence all over again on an upstroke, except this time on the A string. Amazing. The way these complicated patterns fit together like puzzle pieces is almost like magic. It feels like it was meant to be that way. And that's the genius of the Yngwie solution. These things look complicated on the surface, but doing it actually feels really natural. It's almost like you're falling through the strings in the direction of your pick slant. The pick slant enables the sweeping that you use on the ascending side, and it also enables the alternate picking that you use on the descending side. And notice, it even makes the left hand easier. You only have to reach to those 3-note per string fingerings once every 8 notes instead of twice. But the real power is in combining both of these solutions. The Yngwie solution is an expert way of moving this way. And the Eric solution is an expert way of moving this way. So if you take the Yngwie solution as far as you can go, when you run out of strings, you can simply switch to the Eric method and keep on going. You can even switch back to the Yngwie system when you hit an unusual fingering shape. Amazing. These 2 systems work perfectly together, like peanut butter and chocolate, or chocolate and peanut butter. So what are you going to do with all this power? Well, the pentatonic scale is just a 2-note per string fingering. So it follows that we could take these sequence ideas and apply them to anything that's 2 notes per string. How about diminished? Awesome, right? What about whole tone? Also cool. In fact, you could take either of these ideas and mix them into your blues playing to spice things up. Think about diminished. If you start on the root note, then the second note of your diminished 7th chord would be the flat 3rd. That's blues. The 3rd note would be the flat 5. That's also blues. And the 4th note would be the major 6. That's major pentatonic, so that works. Whole tone is also cool. The whole tone scale is only 2 notes different than Mixolydian. So it's basically a dominant sound with these 2 extra notes mixed in for outside color. Now you don't have to go crazy and sequence these things all over the place. You can just use little bits of them and then connect right back to your blues playing. Or you can use the diagonal nature of a lot of these patterns to connect from one pentatonic position to another. Here we're using diminished to connect the box to the 3rd position. The power of this is really limitless. One of my favorite ways of being creative in lead playing is to take interesting mechanical concepts and marry them to interesting tonalities. And we're thrilled that so many of you feel the same way. This kind of picking knowledge would have been science fiction when I was a kid. If you showed up to a guitar contest with this kind of firepower, that'd be like rolling up to the club in a time-traveling DeLorean that you found in the barn. But if this kind of knowledge and the creativity that it can inspire is now becoming accessible enough that we can get over 100 correct responses in a matter of hours, That is everything that cracking the code is about.